Okay, so for this assignment example, we're going to be creating a program called bottles per hour. And this program calculates how many bottles per hour a worker drinks. This program will ask the worker how many hours they work in a single shift, how many bottles of water they consume in a single shift, how much money each bottle of water costs, and how many bottles of water they have in their backpack. This information will be calculated and displayed. The user will be asked a bunch of questions, and at the very end, the bottles per hour will be printed. The cost of bottles to start and finish the worker's shift will be printed. The bottles used will be printed as well as the bottles left over. And last but not least, the value of the bottles purchased in total will be printed in comparison to the value of bottles left over. Let's get started. So click type here to search and type Visual Studio Code. Click on Visual Studio Code. And for this, we'll create a new file. So click on File and then New Text File, Control S, and type bottles per hour.py and save it to the desktop. Okay. So let's make a couple comments, and a comment in Python is a hashtag and any line after the hashtag. So what's really neat is you can make comments, and comments can help software developers see what different components mean in a program. Even though you may have mnemonic variables, it might not be clear exactly if somebody's very new to editing the program as to how things work. So for these comments, we'll say, for each ask, the user should input the following. Okay, 7 hours in a single shift, 5 bottles of water consumed in a single shift. I'll just put a space right over here. $1 per bottle of water. 10 bottles of water in the user's backpack, maximum number that can fit. And let's just put spaces here. Okay, so this is what we want the user to put in. The user might put other values, and so we need to be prepared for other values, but this would be ideal. And the reason why I'm putting these values is because in your homework assignment, which is not bottles per hour, but miles per gallon, there will be recommended values just so that the program works as expected. Okay. So, reminder to the developer, use mnemonic variable names that can be understood, and we will be doing that. Next, ask for how many hours in a single shift. Basically, the information that the user is inputting, we want to ask the user first. So ask for how many bottles consumed in a single shift. Ask for how much a bottle of water costs. Ask for how many bottles of water did you purchase. How many are in your backpack. Right. And the next steps are to calculate the bottles per hour, calculate the cost of water to hydrate you for each shift, calculate the price of all of the bottles you purchased, combined, and calculate how many bottles you have remaining. Right. Next, we'll display the bottles per hour, display the cost of water to hydrate you during your shift, display how many bottles you used, and how much you have left, all in one line. And display how much money you spent to fill up your backpack and the remaining consumption value you have. And we'll do a word wrap here. Left in your backpack. Okay, so this is all the information we want, and I'll leave these comments up here. Now that we've typed them all, we will move on to the variables and assignments. So let's make mnemonic variables. We need hours per shift, right? And we need bottles per shift. We need the bottle cost and bottles purchased. Okay. So imagine that somebody is working in a track and field job. They need a lot of water. Maybe there's a lot of heat involved in the job, and they have a backpack filled with a certain amount of water, and at the end of the day, the water amount will be different. And this water they had to purchase to put in their backpack. Okay, so let's assign the first variable to an input. How many hours do you work in a single shift? Put a space at the end because we know we want room for the user to type. And now we're going to turn this hours per shift into a float. Hours per shift, right? And so in your homework, you might not need a float, considering that the number may be a whole number, but if it is a float, if it's not a whole number, if it's in between, like maybe 1.5 hours, then float will work very nicely. So float hours per shift. And you won't be doing bottles per hour, you will be doing miles per gallon for your homework. But I'll show that template at the very end, and that template will also be in Brightspace. Okay, so hours per shift is float hours per shift, bottles per shift, and now we have to do input for this as well. How many bottles of water do you consume per shift? And now bottles per shift becomes, let's do a float again. Okay, and so the float will be bottles per shift. Same thing with the bottle cost. Input, how much does a bottle of water cost? And let's set that to a float as well. Bottle cost is float bottle cost. Okay. Bottles purchased, let's set that to our last input. How many bottles did you initially buy? And take that amount and float it. Okay. That's the last of the questions we're going to be asking the user. The next part is formulas. So I'll scroll down, but I'll keep the questions we're asking the user up there. And now let's type in the formulas. So we need bottles per hour. And for some reason that didn't go, so I'm going to say bottles per hour, cost, bottle price, and remainder. This is the information we need. There might be more or less information needed in the miles per gallon homework that you have. But back to bottles per hour, it's bottles per shift over the hours per shift. For the cost, it's the bottles per shift times the bottle cost. The bottle price is the price of all the bottles. So bottles purchased, and why is there bottle purchased? I meant to say bottles purchased. Okay. Bottles purchased times the bottle cost. And lastly, the remainder is bottles purchased minus bottles per shift. Right, so now we have our input statements, we have our formulas, and we have the comments that helped us organize this program. All right, lastly, let's print a whole bunch of statements. Bottles per hour, which is BPH. Let's print cost of bottles to start and finish your shift, and that with the $, single quote, comma, and put the cost there. Now print bottles used over bottles left, and this will be bottles per shift, and continue the string with a /, and end the sentence with the remainder, what's left over. All right, and last but not least, we'll print our last print statement, value of bottles purchased in total over the value of bottles left over, and put a $, and that single quote there, and this will be bottle price. Okay, put a comma, another double quote, /, $, and the double quote, put a comma, and now we'll put a set of parentheses. Okay. Going to multiply this by the cost, so we can put cost right here, and what we're multiplying by the cost is the remainder, which is the bottles purchased minus the bottles per shift, over the bottles per shift. Okay. So how many did you buy minus how many you already used? So this is how many you have left over the bottles per shift. How many do you have left out of how many do you consume? This should get us the value of the bottles left over. So Control S, and let's run this. Oops. And there was times, right? Multiplication symbol needed. Let's run this again. All right. How many hours do you work in a single shift? Put 7. How many bottles? 5. $1 per bottle, and 10 bottles initially purchased. Right, so how many bottles initially purchased? 10 bottles per hour. Well, there's 7 hours in a single shift, and you drink 5 in a single shift, so that's less than 1 bottle per hour. Cost of bottles to start and finish is $5. You used $5 worth of bottles. You have $5 worth of bottles left because you got 10 and they're $1 a piece. So there's 10 total. You used 5, you have 5 left. Value of the bottles purchased in total is 10. Value of the bottles left over is 5. Right. So in your homework assignment, and I'm going to bring it here, you will be doing miles per gallon. It's going to look a little bit different, but similar in some ways. There may be some lines missing or some lines that might not be needed. Who knows? But for each ask, the user will use the following so that the program runs well. And you can put these comments in, and this template is available on Brightspace as well. You're going to ask for how many miles it takes to arrive at the vacation destination. You can ask for how many gallons it took, how much does a gallon cost, and then how many gallons did you purchase, not necessarily use, right? So complete this homework assignment, and just like last time, save it as a text file and upload it to Brightspace.